The action of the narrative occurs in Gotham City in 1981. Arthur Fleck is a professional clown with the entertainment business Ha-Ha's. Although he suffers from severe depression, he is able to maintain a modicum of hope by putting on shows and making other people laugh. He has been hired to promote a shop by dancing and waving a sign. One time, a group of punk teenagers steals the sign, and Arthur has to chase them into an alley to get it back. While he's down, they throw the sign at his face and start kicking him viciously. Today's Gotham is plagued by violent crime, high unemployment, and widespread poverty. A social worker helps Arthur with his medication and persistent mental health difficulties. A young passenger observes Arthur while riding home on the bus. The boy laughs at Arthur's antics, but the boy's mother orders him to stop it. Arthur's laughter soon becomes uncontrollable and hysterical. He gives his mom a card that explains his mental illness and why he laughs the way he does when she confronts him about it. When Arthur gets back to his high-rise apartment complex, he finds his sick mother, Penny, waiting for him. They have finished eating and are now watching Murray Franklin's chat program on television. Arthur daydreams about appearing on the show and attracting Murray's interest. Arthur's fantasy endears him to the crowd and Murray by having him tend to his mother. Murray feels a kinship with Arthur and asks him on stage to embrace him in front of the audience. Penny used to work for Thomas Wayne, and it turns out that she is enamored with the millionaire to the point that she has been writing to him to try to improve their financial situation. When Arthur's co-worker Randall hears about the mugging, he arms him with a revolver for safety at Ha-Ha's. Guns are prohibited on the job, so Arthur is both surprised and relieved to get such a present, but he ends up using it to boost his self-esteem. Not long after this, however, he is confronted by his heartless boss, who not only reprimands him for missing the sign but also deducts the cost of it from his paycheck. Arthur gives a sour grin in response. One of Arthur's neighbors, Sophie Demond, is a single mother whom he quickly falls in love with. She engages him in polite conversation about topics she knows will interest him. While he is trying to make an impression on her, he comes off as strange and awkward. Once, he decides to spend the day tailing her. A while later, she drops by his place and asks whether he was following her. He acknowledges that he was, but she seems unfazed. He extends an invitation for her to come see him perform stand-up comedy. The combination of his charisma and humor is enough to win her over, despite her initial reluctance. Arthur watches comedians perform to learn from them, but his forced, hysterical laughing only makes him feel more out of place and embarrassed. On the night of his performance, Arthur heads to the comedy club. Because of his intense anxiety, he begins to chuckle uncontrollably until he is unable to form coherent sentences. After that, he launches into his not very funny routine. Only Sophie in the audience seems to be enjoying Arthur's jokes. This helps him feel safe enough to keep on cracking jokes despite the anguish going on inside of him. When Arthur grows up, he dresses up as a clown and visits a children's hospital to bring smiles to the patients' faces. He dropped his gun on the floor after bringing it along. Arthur's employer yells at him about it later. Even though Arthur begs his supervisor for another chance, the latter dismisses him immediately. To add insult to injury, Randall blames Arthur for obtaining the weapon on Arthur's own initiative. After a night at Ha-Ha's, Arthur, decked out in full clown regalia, witnesses 3 inebriated young Wall Street types working for Wayne Enterprises harassing a woman on the subway. Unintentionally, Arthur starts laughing, which attracts the attention of the males, while the woman runs away from the car. The men walk up to Arthur, make fun of him, and his laughter, all before they begin to beat him. Even though Arthur tries to defend himself, the two of them quickly form a team and mercilessly knock him out. After finally snapping, Arthur pulls out a gun and shoots 2 of them dead in self-defense, then follows the final man off the train and kills him on the steps. Arthur, in disbelief at what he has done, runs for the nearest public men's restroom. A sudden burst of inspiration causes him to break out into solo dance after a brief period of feverish introspection. He looks at himself in the smudged mirror and sees a strong, resilient clown. After stowing the weapon, he tracks down Sophie's apartment complex and gives her a first kiss. The 3 deaths make headlines, with some people viewing it as a strike against the wealthy and others showing support for the killers. Thomas Wayne speaks out against it, calling the lower class clowns, a term that quickly has symbolic significance within this group. The following day, Arthur goes through his ha-ha's locker, but not before confronting Randall about betraying him and damaging the time-punching machine. The next thing he knows, he's on his way, full of confidence and independence. Clown rioters are shown causing havoc throughout the city and criticizing the rich and powerful in news footage. Arthur realizes that he is responsible for this, and as he starts to realize his full potential, he is filled with joy. One of Penny's letters to Thomas is subsequently discovered by Arthur, confirming his identity as Thomas's son. As Bruce Wayne's son, Arthur visits the Wayne mansion. By sticking his hands through the gate and making Bruce grin after a magic trick, he comes to the realization that he and Bruce may or may not be blood related to each other. But Alfred shows up to order Arthur to leave. In this passage, Arthur talks about his mom and how she helped Thomas. Alfred claims he does recall Penny, but that he now knows she lied to him. Before he can strangle Alfred through the bars, Arthur realizes that Bruce is watching. In the end, Arthur is able to regain control of his emotions and makes a break for it from the Wayne home. Later that night, Arthur catches up with Thomas at a free theatrical performance. By pretending to be an usher, Arthur is able to sneak into the theater. In an effort to confront Thomas Wayne about the possibility that he is his father, he follows him into a men's room. Arthur brings up Penny, whom Thomas recognizes. Even though Thomas admits that Penny worked as a housekeeper for him in the past, he insists that Arthur is not his son and that she must be suffering from delusions. Thomas continues by saying that Penny never mentioned Arthur's adoption to him, a claim Arthur flatly denies before bursting out in uncontrollable laughter. Thomas, who has no idea how badly Arthur is hurt, snaps and hits him in the face before having him ejected from the building. Arthur goes home, where he beats himself up by banging his head on the fridge in a fit of melancholy and yearning. Knowing that Arthur lost his job earlier that day and hearing that the suspect was wearing clown makeup, two police investigators, Burke and Garrity, visit his flat the next day to ask him about the train killings. Arthur says he had nothing to do with it and the cops leave. Penny becomes unwell shortly thereafter and is admitted to the hospital. Sophie waits patiently for Arthur to finish caring for his mom. When Arthur watches Murray's TV show from the hospital, he is wounded to find that Murray used a clip from Arthur's stand-up routine as an opportunity to humiliate Arthur. Murray's show's representative calls Arthur later. Arthur hesitantly agrees to appear as a guest after being asked to do so. After researching past guests' interviews on the comedy program, Arthur chooses to end his own life in front of the live audience to get a reaction. On the hunt for concrete evidence, Arthur visits Arkham Asylum and meets with a clerk named Carl who maintains a file on Penny. Carl denies Arthur access to the file he requests, so Arthur takes it and leaves. After sneaking off to a dark stairwell, Arthur opens the documents and reads them, discovering that Thomas was speaking the truth. When Penny adopted Arthur, he had been found abandoned as a newborn, but the truth is that she beat him, tied him to a radiator, and generally treated him like a slave. According to the paperwork, Arthur's laughing disorder was likely brought on by a brain injury. Back at the hospital, Arthur tells Penny that he once felt his life was a tragedy but now realizes it's a fucking comedy. So saying, he suffocates Penny to death. After getting back to his own place, Arthur breaks into Sophie's place. Afraid for her daughter's safety, she begs him to leave after she sees him. To Arthur's inquiry as to whether or not she has ever experienced a truly awful day, she says that she doesn't even know him. This demonstrates that prior sightings of Sophie were merely in Arthur's imagination. Arthur, shattered and irritated, apologizes for his intrusion and storms out of Sophie's flat, leaving her alone. Prepared to go on Murray's show, Arthur begins by painting his face white. Former co-workers Randall and Gary, a short man, pay a visit to him in his apartment. After hearing the news of Penny's death, they express their condolences, but Randall then starts talking about how he and Garrity were visited by Burke and Garrity at their apartments to ask them about the subway killings. Arthur breaks when he learns Randall is merely trying to use him to cover his own butt. He stabs him twice in the face and then smashes his skull against the wall. Gary, afraid, challenges Arthur's actions and begs to be released. Arthur concedes before frightening him jokingly. Gary tries to open Arthur's door but can't reach the lock because of how tall Arthur is. To which Arthur readily agrees, pausing only long enough to congratulate Gary for being the first good person he's ever met. Arthur gives Gary a peck on the head and then releases him. The next step is for Arthur to dye his hair green, apply full clown makeup, and change into a burgundy outfit. He proceeds to dance down the hallways, reveling in his own madness and the freedom it affords him. When Burke and Garrity spot Arthur dancing on the street, they immediately rush in to make an arrest. As they pursue Arthur, he escapes into a subway car full of Gotham residents who have been inspired to dress as clowns in response to the murders. When Arthur dons a clown mask he stole from a protester and accidentally sets off a fight on the train, he finds himself in a bit of trouble. A clown impedes the investigators' pursuit of Arthur, and Burke kills him in a scuffle over the revolver. As the police swarm the location, the clowns pull the investigators out of the subway and begin beating them mercilessly, allowing Arthur to escape. Arthur and Murray, and his agent Jean, meet in the TV studio. To start with, Arthur requests that Murray introduce him as Joker, as that's what Murray called him in the clip. To Murray's inquiry as to whether or not the political motivations behind Arthur's clown makeup, Arthur responds, "Not something I put much stock in. That's because I don't have any faith in anything." While waiting to be presented, Arthur notices that Murray is showing a video of an unsuccessful attempt by Arthur to crack a joke. Arthur's goals and thoughts shift as a result, and he eventually breaks out into dance for the crowd. He makes a terrible joke-telling attempt at Murray, but the latter finds the joke hilarious in its dark humor. Arthur continues by confessing to the murders in the subway after being challenged with this. Arthur's seriousness dawns on Murray and the viewers. Arthur claims that the only reason people are sympathetic to the victims is because Thomas Wayne spoke on their behalf, and that if it weren't for Wayne, people like him would be disregarded and trampled. Even as Murray and the viewers' frustration with Arthur rises, so does his. When Murray scolds Arthur, the situation develops. He responds by snapping and making another joke while laughing maniacally. The man yells, "What do you get when you cross a mentally ill loner with a society that abandons him and treats him like trash?" Murray tries to quiet him down before calling the police. Arthur then yells, "You get what you deserve," before publicly shooting and killing Murray. In response to the murder, the audience flees in panic and the story quickly spreads through the media. Next, Arthur lets out a real chuckle for the first time in his life. Due to Arthur's actions, Gotham is currently being besieged by citizens disguised as clowns who have taken to the streets anarchically. The Wayne family emerges from the theater to discover the streets in utter anarchy. Thomas, along with his wife Martha and Bruce, retreat into an alley, but one of the clowns pursues them and delivers the same joke as Arthur did on the Murray Franklin show, telling Thomas that he is getting what he deserves. That's when he opens fire on Bruce, killing Thomas and Martha. While all is going on, the police have taken Arthur into custody. When Arthur sees all the mayhem and devastation he's wreaked, he glances out the window and laughs maniacally. A group of clowns in an ambulance slam into the automobile at that very moment, killing the police officers inside and rescuing Arthur, who had been trapped inside and was now hurt and unconscious. When Arthur comes to, he's greeted by a throng of cheering criminals wearing clown masks. As Arthur, finally enjoying the fame he craved, stands on a car and accepts their praise, the rioters cheer him on. After a while of dancing to their cheers, he stops and realizes his nose is bleeding severely. Then, he stands before them, imposing like a deity, spreading the blood across his upper lip and grinning. Later on, Arthur winds up at Arkham Asylum. As he recounts this anecdote, he chuckles as he imagines a young Bruce towering over his parents in the alley. Arthur chuckles even more at the realization that he has made Bruce a reflection of himself. When he meets a new social worker, he says he wishes he could tell her a joke but realizes she probably wouldn't understand it. A few minutes later, Arthur exits the room, followed by orderlies who rush after him while he leaves a trail of bloody footprints. If you thought our video was entertaining, you should consider becoming a subscriber to our channel.